was my only friend!
Mary Kay Mabe, you're from the Sinclair History Department.
Right.
And you're going to be part of a presentation this weekend about James M. Cox.
Right.
And if I go out on the street stand in line at the hot dog stand, and I say, hey everybody, James M. Cox is going down this weekend. Are you guys excited? Unfortunately, I might get some strange looks like,
Yeah.
what are you talking about, man? Why is James M. Cox important to us in 2012? And we'll talk more about James Cox. But who was the guy? We see his name all around our town, but I don't think a whole lot of people, really know the importance of him. So tell me about James Cox.
And you've hit an important point. Not too many people really know who this guy is. And when they're thinking of James M. Cox, who they're thinking of is the guy who's associated with the Dayton Daily News. Mm-hmm. But this is a really complex guy, because he had a political side to him as well. Teaching here at Sinclair, I've worked it into my History of Ohio class, and when I'm explaining to my classes that he was one of our congressmen, and we're talking early 1900s, and then he went on to be our governor, and he was a 3-term governor for the state of Ohio, and then he was a presidential candidate. I get all these amazed stares. It's kind of like he's the same guy that was the newspaper owner, and it's like, yes, he was. Now, what's really significant about him is Ohio was doing some kind of like some progressive legislative changes in around the 19-teens. And the Ohio voters had finally realized that they needed to do some updating to the Ohio State Constitution.
What kind of changes were there?
Pardon?
What kind of changes specifically?
Well, some things like, for example, women's rights, temperance issues. We also needed to address some municipal reforms like home rule. This is what got, like for example, Dayton got their city manager around this time as well. He had 4 key areas that he was really, that he claimed that were just his high points when he was governor. Workmen's compensation was one, prison reform was one. One of the other ones was educational reform, and the other one was child and family benefits. And so, he was very instrumental in getting all that passed through.
What kind of thing was someone walking down the street today, say in the city of Dayton, or social program, or what that is here today that James Cox initiated back in those days?
Well, when you look at the workmen's compensation program, or workers' compensation program, he did not say like initiate that, but what he did is he refined it to the point where it is today. And really kind of got it going. What was happening way back then, especially with that particular program, employers would kind of muddle, through legislative processes and delays, and they were endless, to the point where it was trying to encourage families just to drop it in terms of getting any type of compensation if there was
like what you see today. We've got 1,000 lawyers.
Yeah.
Come on at us.
Yeah. And so, in essence, what it did is it put some definitions, that limited all that, litigation. And it kind of said who was responsible, for the premiums and so forth, and how quickly things had to happen. That was one of the things. Now that was basically, the bones was already in place. He kind of pulled it back together himself when he was governor at that time. When you're talking about, like, for example, child and family legislation, when you're talking the early 1900s, there were a lot of children working in factories. So one of the things he was doing is he really wanted minimum ages when children could be working, in those kind of environments, and also how long, maximum work hours they could work. One of the other pieces of legislation is that prison reform. He was very much, he believed in rehabilitation instead of punishment. And when it came to the educational aspect of all those changes, what he did is he held a kind of a statewide convention for all the schools. He sent out a commission to kind of evaluate and assess all the schools in the state of Ohio, and to meet with different civic organizations and say, okay, this is what we're trying to achieve. Now, you come to this big Congress convention, and let's come together and come up with some common standards for the state of Ohio. And this is where you have the common curriculum, where we're all learning the same thing, at the same levels. And we also have, as well as, requirements to be a teacher. Now, James Cox was a teacher himself originally. When he was in, high school, he took the test. He was from down in Butler County, in Middletown area, and he said in his autobiography he just happened to take the test to see if he was going to pass it. He took the test, passed it, and he actually taught for a while, and he realized he hated that job. And it's kind of like he had an opportunity. He was always a guy that had opportunities that came his way, and he took advantage of them. And it ended up kind of being his legacy. He was kind of in the right place at the right time. An opportunity came his way, he took advantage of it, and he was willing to take risks. He knew someone needed to do the job, and he was willing to step up and do it.
Who do you think would be a comparable politician of modern times with James M. Cox?
That's hard to say. That's really kind of hard to say. I'd really have to think about that one for a while. Yeah. But, but you see, you got to keep in mind too that this was the time period when someone was asked, "Will you be our candidate for this position?" Men back then who were public figures, they felt that if they were asked, it was their duty to serve. The big part of that I really want to spend some time on getting to know him better is his relationship with Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Because during the 1920 presidential campaign, Franklin Roosevelt was his vice presidential running mate, and they didn't know each other prior to that time. And they met shortly after the nomination. Roosevelt came to Columbus to his office, and he was so impressed with Franklin Roosevelt, and that ended up being a lifelong friendship. And I've read some of their personal letters, and it's interesting just to kind of see how that whole relationship evolved. It goes from "my dear governor" to Mr. Cox and Mr. Roosevelt to Frank and Jim. And at one point in his autobiography, James Cox talks about he had a question, so he picked up the phone and called Frank at the White House. And it's kind of like, that's one thing that I want people to know, that he was a loyal friend, and that's kind of a part of him I want to get to know.
Well, I thank you so much for your time.
Sure thing.
You know I pulled you over. Because you're a Reuben.